I've had a lot of general ideas of what exactly was going to happen with Gray going forward in 100 Years Quest. And I mean, it's been what, almost 7 years now since 100 Years Quest has started, and there's always been that question of what exactly, in terms of character style progression, he was going to go down. And you can look at everybody else right now. Urza's got her whole weapon enchanting. Wendy has enchanting in general, but she also has dragon slayer areas that she can improve upon with Dragon Force. You can pretty much do that with any slayer. But Gray's is the one that's kind of strange with it. Lucy now has a Mercphobia key, which is pretty interesting, and then general star dress progression as she's been doing. And Natsu, I mean, like, we literally just had another bit with Natsu in this last chapter about how, like, oh, you know, you could unlock your true power, and then, you know, making a prison of flames that burn anything. Like, there's just hyper going around for everybody. The one that I think has been the strangest, and I've mentioned this a couple times, it's not like this is new to me saying, like, Grays is in a weird spot, because we've, you know, I don't need to go too much into it in you know, in the scope of 100 Years Quest. Grays had a lot just more so towards his character, not as much in terms of his like character abilities and whatnot. We've had lots of like small tweaks and like little bits of progression when it comes to what abilities Gray has, but nothing that it's like very concrete that it shows like he's been progressing down a set path since we have started 100 Years Quest. I think the reason though for that is kind of on purpose. It's similar to how, if you look at early Fairy Tail, Natsu was the last one to get any form of character backstory and really delving into his own origin, and Gray was one of the first. It's really, if you know, not counting relatively like the small bits for Lucy at the start, it's really, you know, you got Galuna Island as the first real arc after Lullaby. So you look at that and you say, okay, well, in reverse, 100 Years Quest, we got lots of Natsu stuff early because of Ignia and all those connections that were need to be put up. So it makes sense of why Gray would be last in you know, in flipping that idea. And Gray has had a lot of stuff that has been in small areas for his character to go forward, like I've mentioned. And you can look at stuff like him talking about alchemy, him, you know, doing it literally again in this most recent chapter, just messing around with water and moisture in the atmosphere when he was turned into Juvia from his fight with Sai. You know, just doing large-scale dynamic ice make when he was fighting Hakune. I would say, like, the low-key, the most impressive thing that Gray has done, in my mind, really, when you think about it, was the bit with Raj when he went up against the Hien illusion. Because it shows that Gray, and this is one of the things that I think is going to be important, is Gray can copy and adjust something into his style from just seeing it, even if he doesn't, even if it's not real, because it was an illusion. It's not like he sees a person actually use a technique. It's just visually he sees it, and his mind is comprehending it. So it's like, even if it's not real, he's able to wrap the idea around in his head after just witnessing something that was, again, an illusion to him, which is really intriguing, because it's the idea of that with like ice make, Gray's general reaction speed, because Gray has always had a very fast level of response and combat speed and just casting speed. He's like a good middle ground between Natsu and Lucy. Lucy has very high casting and reaction speed. Natsu is much more of a direct combat fighter with his general combat attacks and speed and whatnot. But Gray has always been in that middle area, like I've said, but in terms of his ability to react, he's always been, I would say, the fastest in the team. And out of all the Slayers, he has the fastest level of adaptation when it comes to running into a new element variation that is otherwise unedible for him, or something that can get past his Slayer resistance. So when you look at stuff like that, you can look at all these pieces of Gray again that fit together. You know, water, you know, larger scale ice make, being able to do dynamic ice make, making so they can move, learning about water and moisture in the atmosphere and how to weaponize that. Just being able to see something and then apply it to his own abilities. And why I think that's important is when you look at all these things and you see where he could progress in terms of what exactly is the next thing for Gray. When you look at all the people around him, and not just from like the guild, you can look at directly, okay, you have Juvia, and then you look at his backstory, you have and you have Ultir. What are three things about them that are all very connected in terms of like ideas? Juvia's magic in core, like she can turn, you know, she has a water body, she has water intangibility, she has the ability to now become water, as we see, to the extent where once she was absorbed by keys, she was able to reform and expand and explode out of his body. So it's not just like, oh yeah, she can turn water momentarily. She can actually turn into the full state of water, even once absorbed and through nefarious states that she's put through. And with Ur at a point turned herself into ice through Ice Shell, and then once it was melted, she became part of the ocean. And with with Ultir gave up a lot of her time, and her lost time became part of time itself. So when you really connect these three women that are directly adjacent to Gray, you have a woman who becomes water, you have a woman that became ice, then became water, and you have a woman whose part of her became part of time. And you look at stuff like that, where it's things that have influenced Gray directly, especially with somebody with an imagination like him. You look at some of the ice people he's fought, especially recently with people like Invul or Hakune, who don't just directly attack you with ice or cold techniques. There's like levels beyond just straight, oh yeah, temperature wise, does this negative level of ice attack. It's like, no, there's stuff like freezing power systems and thoughts and ignoring resistances and immunities and abilities. The cold essence itself, like there's just stuff that goes into a level that would I would imagine influence Gray's creativity when he starts seeing this, because in theory Gray should be able to do any of the abilities that he's seen that are ice related already, and because it wouldn't be the same, I would imagine, directly maybe with Hakune, because hers is a spirit art. Maybe there'd be some form of gap in between with effect, but effectively Gray should still be able to use it. But when you think about it, as well as stuff with alchemy and the fact that Gray keeps having these comments whenever alchemy is involved, as well as if you go back, there are moments where Maker magic is called alchemy-like and compared to alchemy early on in the story. So, you know, when you kind of ball all these things together, the idea is like, if Gray sees and knows about Viernes, you know, changing into ideas and turning into concepts, could Gray figure out how to do a similar thing with with Devil Ice, or, you know, progressing any areas with that with Ice Make? If say he turns himself into the cold momentarily, like say when he does an attack, it's like he does his zero longsword, and instead of moving really fast between point A and point B, it'd be like you turn into pure cold and then go through someone. It would just be like, you know, you maybe like you still use the attack, so it's like you're using literally a blade made out of the cold air as you're passing through them with no physical form. Because it wouldn't even be something like Juvia's, where Juvia's body turns into water through magic, because there are ways to damage through that, either through specific elemental counters, as we saw when Wall made his robots be producing steam, and with Magolti's sense that just deals direct damage to your senses. So Gray would be able to ignore both of those, because it's not a magic to magic interaction, or a way where even if you aren't using magic on him, you know, say like Juvia's case, Juvia's water body is still something that is structured from magic. So if you have something that disrupts that, you would be able to damage them, whereas it wouldn't be the case with Gray, because similar to how Viernes turns into an idea, there isn't anything physically there. Even the idea of a magical mass from a spell, Gray would just literally be a big cloud of cold, like literally just a big space of negative temperature, which would be really cool. I love the idea of that, to give him this further expanded delving into lowering of temperature, specifically because Natsu keeps going into, like, Natsu's been leaning very hard every single arc in 100 Years Quest since the fight with Madmal, where he has been amping his temperature specifically, because he's always done that naturally, but it's very clear like now he's actually starting to really see the value in specifically going for that, you know, less direct explosion and like wildfire flames and more of a controlled and targeted inferno kind of style. So if Gray could get something similar to that, especially, it'd be really cool to see how Gray would use something like that in battle, because I feel like if Gray's whole general moveset, because he has different styles and whatnot, but he is primarily a like mid-range caster. Gray has long range, Gray has close range and close combat, but the majority of Gray's style is he is keeping a moderate amount of range and attacking with just, you know, mid-range attacks. Like, you know, Ice Make Lance is like Gray's bread and butter, very basic one. He's got, you know, Freeze Lancer and stuff and other attacks, but that is always to me his most basic thing, and what he starts, because, you know, like Hammer and whatnot, Battle Axe, any of his go-to general attacks sit at a range where, you know, you're not within arm's reach, but you're a chunk distance away. You're, you know, 20, 30 feet, maybe 20, 15 is probably like that, 15, 20 feet. So if Gray could have something like that where he is able to control his movement more, but also to where his movement is going to affect the battle area, because if he's moving around as like a massive cold, or he's affecting things with more so not hitting it with ice, but more so hitting it with cold that produces ice, or again ice that results in, it's something that's so cold it affects the area and stuff around it from its impact and whatnot. There's a lot of just really neat stuff that Gray can go from this, just because it's so different from what everyone else is doing. Because it's not like he's gonna just, I learned concept alchemy. If Gray learns some form of alchemy to go into his already set abilities, or he integrates the ideas of alchemy into ice make to make some new type of ice make, that is more so what I'd be wanting to go with. Is I would love it if Gray could get something really, really crazy and cool, just out of, you know, really jump him up to make sure like nobody can deny where he should be at as Natsu's rival. But I don't want it to be something that is out of the bounds of what he should, like what his character style and moveset is. I obviously want it to be ice and cold themed, and I don't want him to just grab something that's addition. Because it'd be cool, say, if you give him something like World Alchemy. Like, if he learns Alchemy, but specifically only in ice styles. Like, if he just learns World Alchemy and he's able to affect the terrain and free stuff over, and it's through... Well, he was there when they were in, you know, dealing with everyone in Gold Owl. He didn't directly deal with World Alchemy one-on-one. But when you compare, it's like if he knows about it, understands it, sees maybe a little bit of it from Viernes, because I feel like Viernes should know World Alchemy just by sitting at a higher position of alchemy than the Signario sisters. But also, like, compare it to like Invul and how Invul used his magic and whatnot. I think it'd be really cool to see Gray combine all these things and move them together. Because the difference between Natsu and Gray, in terms of a lot of their attacks, and this is something I'll end on, is Gray has literally a magic that at the end of the day there is no set number of ways to do it, and Slayer magic is similar to a degree, because obviously how you're implementing, you're generally just putting in, like, at the core of it, you're putting in some form of attribute onto a melee attack, and however you do your melee attack. But Maker magic, again, it could be relatively anything, and it can do stuff, you know, like make clones, make structures, you know, have effects, be able to just general, I mean, like, what is it? Judy's got like water make blood. Like, there's such a scope of Maker magic that somebody like Gray, who really excels in picking up weird things along the way, and being able to analyze his opponents and figuring out how he can integrate stuff into his own moveset, as well as like environmental things, because he's only gotten better at it. So I would like to see him really do something crazy against a character who has arguably the most, like, Viernes has the idea of, like, it's like Maker magic can do anything in its specific area, you know, obviously limited to what its element does and whatnot, whereas Viernes kind of has that for everything with concept alchemy, and the only real limitation seems to be your imagination and knowledge. Like, if you don't know anything about science or don't know anything about like the craft, it'd probably be, you know, throwing stuff at nothing, whereas I would imagine Viernes is pretty smart on this, and he's gonna become a little bit more tricky as the fight goes on. But we'll see. I'm still really hoping they have a conversation and talk, and Viernes takes a liking to Gray, and maybe Gray has a some form of I don't know, upgrade from Viernes, where he's like, you know what, I don't really like Ignia, I kind of like you, you're kind of cool. Maybe he recognizes the cross, and he's like, you know what, I've seen that in a different civilization. They called the guy the Rave Master. You know what, you remind me just a little bit of him. And Gray's like, I don't really know what you're talking about, but it's pretty cool. Something like that would be pretty funny, but we'll see. I mean, we got a couple more days until the next chapter, and I personally just really want to see Gray get something outstanding. I don't need like a mega transformation. I would love to just get something that is new. Like, if he could just have a progressed bit of his form, maybe he gets a horn, maybe he gets like some cool spikes and like a new effect or two, and something like, oh, he can one-armed ice make while doing this, because he doesn't actually have to do any motions. He can just think and craft the ice by chilling the air in certain ways. Like, he's just literally forging it with his mind, kind of. He's creating the ice in his mind, because he's able to freely control like the cold air, and almost like his hands. Like, I'm trying to think, what is it like? I'm trying to, what are they called in Elfen Lied? Oh, are they vectors? I'm trying to remember, but you know, the little transparent ghost hands. It's like something like that, but Gray's doing Surely the Cold. That'd be sick. That actually would be really cool. I actually will add that as the last thing. If he has almost like, oh crap, what's that guy's name in Eden Zero? Oh my god, the anime will save the universe guy who had the 4 metal arms. If Gray has kind of like that, but it's made of cold, so they're not actually there. They're literally just spots that are, you know, like sub-zero temperatures in the shape of hands, and he's able just to kind of use that to craft with his mind almost. That'd be pretty sick. But anyway, other than that, I'll talk to you guys in the next one. Bye.